up, you guys? The Curious Owl here, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the first novel in the Morganville Vampire series by Rachel Caine, Glass Houses. So let me start off by saying that I was surprised by how low I rated this first novel in this series because, as many of you know, it is my most favorite series of all time. To basically give a quick synopsis for this series, it starts off with this girl named Claire Danvers who moves to the city of Morganville, Texas to go to school early. She's basically been accepted early to college, but she wanted to originally go to Caltech. Unfortunately, though, her parents were not really up for her moving over like 2,000 miles away from home, so they told her that either she had to wait to go to Caltech until she was 18, or she had to go to this more local college that is only a couple hours from home in Morganville. Unfortunately for Claire, being the youngest in college does not have its perks. If anything, it is more of a nightmare than she had anticipated, as many of the girls that she lives with on campus are bullying her to the point where they're nearly trying to kill her. So in order to remove herself from that situation, she leaves the dorm and tries to find a place to live while still being in school. From there, she finds this place called the Glass House, which is headed by Michael Glass, who is an 18-year-old boy, and his two roommates, Shane Collins and Eve Rosser, both also 18. Michael decides to let Claire stay for at least a little while until she can get on her feet, and through there, Claire essentially finds out that the entire town is run by vampires. So the entire time Claire is here, she is really questioning everything. She really questions all that she knows, as she's a woman of science. She doesn't believe in things of magic and paranormal activity, but it is becoming very hard for her to accept the fact that things are as black and white as she had originally thought. This first novel basically just follows Claire as she's trying to understand the world and finds out some secrets about the friends that she makes in this story, and really comes to understand just how bad things can really get when you don't do what you're supposed to in Morganville. Like I said, this is one of my most favorite series of all time, but something that I realized, and I think has something to do with the fact that I have grown a lot older since I had left this series, is that the writing is a little more juvenile than I had remembered. Keeping in mind that at the time I first read this series, I was about 14 or 15 years old. And now at 21 years old, after having not read anything from the series in about 4 years or so, it definitely reads like it is meant for a 14, 15-year-old kid. Given the fact that Claire is a 16-year-old character, it is written a little bit more on the younger side of the YA spectrum, in my opinion, because the fact that it's supposed to kind of, I think, really gravitate more towards the younger YA readers. The reason I say this is because the story itself was great, but I think the overall tone and writing of the story is meant for people that are getting involved with paranormal fantasy, very much for your beginning readers of paranormal fantasy. This is definitely not a series I would recommend for your more seasoned veterans of paranormal fantasy. I'm not saying that it's trashy by any means for me. I still love this series with all my heart and soul, but I was greatly surprised that I was not as big of a fan on the writing style as I remember fondly of when I was younger. And I think that has a lot to do with my age and my maturity, and the fact that I have found so many other writers that have done the same kind of story and written it in a very different tone that I think I've liked a lot more. That being said, though, everything else about this novel I love so much. As you can tell, I have so many pink tabs within this book because of the fact that I still had so many great memories of the story. I really honestly forgot a lot about some of the things that are involved with the story, especially when it came to some of the smaller characters. I forgot that there were some things that happened that I was like, oh my god, that actually did happen. And I totally forgot about it because it's been like 4 years since I left the series. But overall, I still really enjoyed it. I think that it's definitely still, I think, a story that I really connected with in a lot of ways, and I definitely still see why I loved it so much when I was a lot younger. I just think that the writing now from a more adult perspective is not as good as I think I would have wanted it to be. But I definitely think that if you're kind of on the younger YA spectrum, you would still enjoy it because it's very simple, it is easy to get through, and honestly, it's really easy to fly through because it's not stuck on really complicated and convoluted language. But I do know that from a 21-year-old standpoint, it's just not as crisp and clean as I wanted it to be, and not as, I think, hard-hitting. But overall, I still really love this book. I definitely still recommend it, especially for those of you that are getting into paranormal fantasy. I think it's definitely more catered towards that kind of demographic as opposed to the older seasoned ones, because I definitely think that they would kind of cringe at some points in this. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this review of Glass Houses. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit the button down below and subscribe and comment outlet in our vlog. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys.